I've been driving trucks for 32 years. When you spend that much time on the road, you develop routines, patterns that keep you sane between the endless stretches of highway. My life off the road was just as predictable. Linda and I had been married for 26 years, living in the same three-bedroom ranch house for most of them. I liked knowing what was coming next. After 3 decades hauling freight across the country, I finally landed a regional route 5 years ago. Home most nights, decent pay, and enough stability that Linda could focus on her freelance graphic design work. She wasn't bringing in much, but it was her thing, something to keep her busy while I was on the road. We had our system. I handled the bills, yard work, and car maintenance. She managed the cooking, cleaning, and ordering whatever we needed online. "Why waste time at the store when you can get it delivered?" she'd say. I didn't argue. After a 12-hour shift behind the wheel, the last thing I wanted was to push a shopping cart around Walmart. That Thursday started like any other. I finished my route by 4, logged my hours, and headed home. Traffic was light, and the spring air felt good coming through the window of my pickup. I was thinking about grilling some steaks when my phone buzzed with a notification. "Your order from Market Fresh is ready for pickup. Please collect today at 6 p.m. at 1423 Riverdale Avenue." I frowned, trying to remember if I'd ordered anything. I hadn't. Sometimes Linda used my account since I had the premium membership through work, but she always mentioned it. And Market Fresh? That was clear across town. We had one just 5 minutes from our house. I pulled into our driveway, still puzzling over the notification. Out of curiosity, I opened the app to check what was ordered. The list made my stomach tighten. Chateau Saint Michel Cabernet, $65. Fresh strawberries, Belgian chocolate truffles, scented candles, lavender and vanilla, imported cheese platter, smoked salmon, 2 sets of plastic champagne flutes. It wasn't our usual groceries. We weren't wine people. I preferred beer, and Linda only occasionally had a glass of cheap white wine. And those other items? They screamed romantic evening louder than any Valentine's Day commercial. 26 years gives you instincts. Something felt wrong, very wrong. But accusations without evidence had ended plenty of my buddies' marriages. I needed to be smart about this. I texted Linda, "Did you order something from Market Fresh?" 3 minutes passed. The message showed as read, but no reply came. I watched those 3 dots appear and disappear twice before I put my phone down and went to shower. When it finally rang 20 minutes later, I was already forming a plan. "Hey, honey," Linda's voice came through the speaker, too casual, too controlled. "Sorry I didn't text back right away. I was in a meeting." "No problem," I said, matching her tone. "Just curious about that Market Fresh order on my account." "Oh, right." A slight pause. "That's for Diane from work. It's her birthday tomorrow, and we're having a little celebration. I'm helping her get some supplies since she's swamped with that big project." Diane? The co-worker Linda had called a pretentious bitch just last Sunday. The one she actively avoided at office parties. That Diane. "That's nice of you," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Didn't know you two were close." "We're not really, but you know how it is. Office politics." She laughed, a pitch too high. "Anyway, I'll be home around 7. There's leftover lasagna you can heat up." "Actually," I said slowly, "I can pick up that order if you want. Market Fresh on Riverdale is on my way to the gym." The silence lasted 2 beats too long. No, I promised I'd handle it. Besides, don't you have that thing with Mike tonight?" I didn't have anything with Mike. She knew my schedule better than that. "Got canceled. I'm free all evening." "Well, I already told Diane I'd meet her there to help carry everything. You know how it is." I did know how it was, just not the way she thought. "Sure, no problem. Have fun at Diane's party." After we hung up, I sat in my recliner, staring at the ceiling fan. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out with an ice cream scoop. I'd been here before, not with Linda, but years ago with my high school sweetheart. The same knot in my gut, the same sick feeling. I pulled up the order details again. 2 of everything, 2 glasses, 2 sets of cutlery. The order wasn't for an office party, it was dinner for 2. And from the expensive wine to the fancy chocolates, it wasn't casual. I could confront her now, demand answers over the phone. But what would that accomplish? She'd have time to prepare, to craft better lies. 26 years deserved more than a phoned-in confrontation. No, I needed to see for myself. Because despite the evidence glowing on my screen, some part of me still hoped for an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe there was some reasonable story that would make sense of everything. I showered, dressed in jeans and a dark blue button-down, and got back in my truck. The clock said 5:15 p.m., plenty of time to reach Market Fresh before the 6 p.m. pickup. As I drove, something Linda had said years ago echoed in my mind. The truth always comes out in the details. How right she was. The Market Fresh on Riverdale Avenue sat in one of those upscale strip malls with fancy landscaping and artisanal coffee shops. I parked in the far corner of the lot, giving me a clear view of both the store entrance and pickup area. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat wasn't. For nearly 30 minutes, I sat watching people come and go, young professionals picking up pre-made dinners, mothers with small children, college kids grabbing energy drinks. No Linda yet. I checked the time, 5:47 p.m. At 5:50, a silver BMW pulled into a space near the entrance. A man stepped out, maybe mid-50s, trim build, salt and pepper hair. He wore tailored pants and a light blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Executive type. The kind who worked out regularly and paid for expensive haircuts. He checked his watch, then his phone, before heading inside. Something about his confident stride made my skin crawl. The way he moved screamed comfortable. Too comfortable for someone just picking up groceries. The store's automatic doors opened at 5:58, and the man emerged carrying 2 large paper bags. He placed them carefully in his trunk, then leaned against his car, scrolling through his phone. I sank lower in my seat, though I doubted he'd recognize me even if he looked directly at me. We'd never met. I was certain of that much. At 6:04, Linda's red Mazda pulled in. My stomach dropped as if I'd driven off a cliff. Until this moment, I'd still been clinging to alternative explanations. Maybe she really was helping a coworker. Maybe I'd misunderstood something. But watching her park beside the BMW crushed those hopes. She checked her makeup in the rearview mirror before getting out, something she only did when she wanted to look good for someone. The man straightened when he saw her. His face lit up with the kind of smile you can't fake. Genuine pleasure at seeing someone you care about. Linda approached him with quick, excited steps. They didn't embrace. They were in public after all. But the man placed his hand on the small of her back as he opened the passenger door for her. It was a gesture of intimacy, of possession, the kind of touch that comes from habit, not first-time meetings. They exchanged words I couldn't hear. Then Linda laughed, that full-bodied laugh I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. She slid into his car with practiced ease, like she'd done it 100 times before. As they pulled away, I sat frozen, knuckles white against the steering wheel. The evidence was undeniable now. The fancy dinner ingredients, the secretive planning, the comfortable familiarity between them. My wife was having an affair. 26 years of marriage, and I'd just become a cliché, the oblivious husband, last to know. But unlike the standard script, I wouldn't be confronting them in the parking lot or following them to wherever they were going. No, I needed time to think, to plan. Because if this was really happening, and clearly it was, then Linda deserved more than a knee-jerk reaction. She deserved something special, something memorable. The drive home passed in a blur. My mind kept replaying the scene. Linda's smile, the man's hand on her back, their easy familiarity. Each mental image twisted the knife deeper. I pulled into our driveway at 6:45. Linda wouldn't be home until much later, I was sure. They had a whole romantic evening planned, wine, strawberries, candlelight. Our house felt different when I walked in, like a movie set rather than a home. The framed photos on the walls, the throw pillows Linda had carefully arranged on the couch, the magnets on the fridge from places we'd visited together, all props in a play where I'd been reading from the wrong script. I sat at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd had breakfast together that morning. Had she been thinking about him while pouring my coffee, while asking about my route for the day? The thought made me sick. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Meeting running late. Don't wait up for dinner. Might be home after 9. Love you. Love you? The words felt like ash in my mouth. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up our bank statements. The truth had a way of leaving breadcrumbs, and I needed to know how long this had been going on, how long I'd been a fool. Credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to. A hotel downtown 3 weeks ago, business conference, she'd said. Gifts purchased that had never appeared in our home. The evidence mounted with each click, stretching back at least 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of coming home to her and telling her about my day, trusting her with my thoughts, my feelings, my life, while she was building a separate life with someone else. I should have seen it. The late-night work calls, the sudden interest in dressing better for client meetings, weekend workshops that left her tired but oddly energized. It had all been there, but I'd trusted her completely. That trust lay shattered now, leaving something harder and colder in its place. I closed the laptop and walked to our bedroom. Her perfume lingered in the air, the expensive kind she'd started wearing recently. A gift from Jennifer at work, she'd explained. Another lie. I opened her closet and examined the clothes hanging there. Designer labels I didn't recognize. New lingerie still with tags. A shopping bag pushed to the back contained a dress I'd never seen. Red, low cut, definitely not for work. My hands shook as I closed the closet door. Raw emotion threatened to overwhelm me. Hurt, betrayal, humiliation, rage, all churning together into something dangerous. I needed to get control before I did something reckless. Deep breaths, clear thinking. I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed where we'd made love 2 nights ago, and forced myself to channel the storm inside me into something productive. Confronting Linda tonight would accomplish nothing. She'd be prepared with excuses, minimizations, counter-accusations. No, this required strategy, planning, the kind of calculated response that would leave no room for manipulation or gaslighting. I picked up my phone and searched. Market Fresh online ordering. By the time Linda came home at 10:30, smelling of wine and wearing the carefully neutral expression of someone guarding a secret, I was already asleep, or pretending to be. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Tomorrow, Linda would learn that truck drivers notice details, and that this particular truck driver had a flair for poetic justice. Morning arrived with the mechanical precision of an alarm clock, same as always. Linda stirred beside me, her morning routine unchanged, as if last night hadn't happened, as if our marriage wasn't built on quicksand. I watched through half-closed eyes as she checked her phone, smiled at something on the screen, then quickly composed her face when she noticed I was awake. "Morning," she said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. "Sleep well." "Like a rock," I lied. I'd spent most of the night cycling between rage and disbelief, planning and discarding various scenarios for what came next. "I've got that big presentation today," she said, heading for the shower. "Might be another late one." "Another late one, of course." "No problem," I called after her. "I've got some errands to run anyway." As soon as I heard the shower running, I grabbed her phone, locked with a fingerprint naturally, but her laptop sat on the nightstand, still logged in. I opened her email, searching for any communication with the mystery man. Nothing obvious in her main inbox. She was too careful for that. but a folder labeled Project Archives contained hundreds of exchanges with someone named Robert. I skimmed through them, each message landing like a physical blow. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place? Last night was amazing. I keep thinking about what if we went away for a weekend? I know a place where no one would recognize us. The emails went back almost a year of deception while I worked 60-hour weeks to support our life together. I heard the shower turn off and quickly closed the laptop, my heart hammering. By the time Linda emerged wrapped in a towel, I was checking my own phone, the picture of nonchalance. "What are your errands today?" she asked, selecting clothes from her closet. Nothing special, just her usual work attire. The performance continued. Just some stuff for the truck, oil change, new wiper blades. I stretched and yawned. Thought I might pick up some groceries, too. "Don't forget your protein powder," she said. "You were running low." The casual domesticity of it all made my stomach turn. Here she was, reminding me about protein powder while planning another rendezvous with her lover. After Linda left for work, I sat at our kitchen table with a legal pad, methodically listing everything I knew. Affair with someone named Robert, likely the man from yesterday, going on for approximately 1 year. Regular meetings, including hotels. Linda covering with work excuses, both physical and emotional involvement based on emails. I needed more information about Robert, a last name, where he worked, whether he was married to, the kind of details that would help me understand exactly what I was dealing with and exactly how to respond. I drove to Market Fresh and approached the customer service desk with my most affable smile. "Hi there," I said to the young woman behind the counter. Her name tag read Melissa. "I'm hoping you can help me. My wife placed an order yesterday that I need to duplicate, but I can't find the confirmation email. It was picked up around 6 p.m. Melissa tapped at her computer. "Name?" "Tom Wright." A few more keystrokes. "Oh, sure. I remember this order. The romantic dinner package. Let me print you a copy of the receipt." Romantic dinner package. Of course, they had a name for it. "Thanks. By the way," I added casually, "my wife mentioned she ran into an old friend here. Robert something? Tall guy? Nice car? Said he ordered the same package." Melissa brightened. "Oh, Mr. Kincaid, he's one of our regulars. Orders that package at least twice a month." Twice a month. Regular enough to be recognized. My mouth went dry. "Thanks," I managed. "That's the one." Armed with a name, Robert Kincaid, and an identical shopping list, I left Market Fresh with my next steps crystallizing. I'd always been good at logistics, planning routes, maximizing efficiency, anticipating problems before they arose. Those same skills would serve me well now. Back in my truck, I plugged the name into Facebook. Several Robert Kincaids appeared, but one stood out immediately, the silver-haired man from yesterday, smiling in a professional headshot. His profile listed him as managing partner at Westridge Financial Advisors. I dug deeper. LinkedIn revealed he'd been with Westridge for 15 years. Their website showed him prominently featured on the leadership team page, married to Caroline Kincaid, according to several tagged photos at charity events, 2 college-aged children, so he was cheating too. Somehow, that made it worse, not better. 2 families being betrayed simultaneously. I closed my laptop and drove to the grocery store. Not Market Fresh, but our regular place closer to home. I had a very specific shopping list to fill. The next 18 hours unfolded with the precision of a military operation. I knew Linda wouldn't be home until late. Another presentation that would undoubtedly involve Robert Kincaid and a location far more intimate than a conference room. That gave me time to prepare. I spent the afternoon gathering everything I needed. First stop, our local Market Fresh, where I purchased exactly what had been in yesterday's order. Same wine, same strawberries, same imported cheese and smoked salmon, same candles. I even bought the same plastic champagne flutes, 2 sets, naturally. Next, I visited the print shop downtown. Using screenshots I'd taken from Linda's laptop, I printed select email exchanges between her and Robert. Nothing explicitly sexual. I didn't need those mental images preserved in high-resolution color, but messages that clearly established the timeline and nature of their relationship. The technician gave me an odd look when I reviewed the prints, but I just smiled and said, "Work project." On my way home, I stopped at our bank and withdrew $5,000 from our joint savings account, half of what was there, nothing that could be considered unfair in a divorce proceeding. Just insurance, in case things went sideways. My final stop was Mike's house. Mike had been my best friend since high school, the only person I trusted completely, now that Linda had destroyed that concept in our marriage. "Jesus, Tom," he said, after I explained the situation. "Are you sure about this? Maybe there's an explanation." I watched them together, Mike. I read their emails. It's been going on for a year. Saying it aloud made it newly painful each time. Trust me, I'm sure. He nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "A witness, and maybe a place to crash if this gets ugly." "You've got both," he said without hesitation. "What time should I come over?" 7. Bring your phone. I want everything documented. At home, I arranged the groceries carefully, setting the stage for what would come next. I placed the wine in the refrigerator to chill, arranged the cheese platter exactly as the store's promotional photo showed it, and positioned the candles strategically around our dining room. Linda texted at 5:30. "Still in meetings. Should be home by 8:30. "Perfect." I replied, "No problem, thinking of making a special dinner." "Any requests?" Her response came quickly. "Don't go to any trouble. I'll probably eat with the team." "The team, right." "No worries," I texted back. "Might just make something simple for myself." At 6:45, Mike arrived, eyebrows rising at the romantic setup. "Quite the production," he said. "Wait until you see the finale," I replied, showing him where to position himself. In the living room, partially hidden by the decorative screen Linda had installed last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her design choice would now serve my purposes. At 7:15, I began final preparations. I laid out the printed emails in a neat line on the dining room table, placed beneath each plate like toxic placemats. I arranged the strawberries and chocolate truffles on our best serving platter. I opened the wine to let it breathe, a courtesy the expensive vintage deserved, even under these circumstances. Then I dressed carefully in my best jeans and the blue button-down shirt Linda had given me for my birthday. "It brings out your eyes," she'd said. I wondered if she'd bought one for Robert, too. At 8:20, headlights swept across our front window, right on schedule. I lit the candles, dimmed the lights, and nodded to Mike, who positioned himself out of sight with his phone ready to record. The front door opened. "Tom?" Linda called, sounding surprised at the dimmed lighting. "What's all this?" I stepped into view, smiling warmly. "Welcome home, honey. Thought I'd surprise you with something special." Linda froze in the doorway, her eyes moving from me to the candlelit table to the open wine bottle, identical to the one she'd just shared with Robert, no doubt. The blood drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. What's the occasion?" she managed, her voice thin. "Oh, no special occasion," I said, maintaining my pleasant tone. "Just thought we'd have a nice dinner. The kind with strawberries, expensive wine, and fancy cheese. You know." I gestured toward the table. "A romantic evening." She took a hesitant step forward, her purse clutched tightly against her side like a shield. That's so thoughtful." "Isn't it? I even got smoked salmon, your favorite." I pulled out her chair. "Please sit. I want to hear all about your presentation." Linda moved robotically toward the table, her expression cycling rapidly between confusion, fear, and the beginning stages of panic. She hadn't figured it out yet, not completely, but her instincts were screaming danger. I watched her closely, memorizing every micro-expression, every nervous gesture. After a year of lying to my face, she deserved this moment of dawning horror, this slow-motion car crash of realization. "Wine?" I offered, holding up the bottle so she could clearly see the label. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed immediately by dismay. But still, she tried to maintain the facade. "Sure," she said, her voice barely audible. "Tom, what's really going on here?" I smiled, enjoying the moment perhaps more than I should have. "Dinner," I said simply. "The kind you like to have with Robert Kincaid." The name hung in the air between us like a live grenade. Linda's face went through a remarkable series of transformations: shock, denial, calculation, and finally, defeat. "Tom," she began, her voice quavering. I turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. If Robert's wife doesn't already know about your affair, she will by tomorrow. She deserves the truth, just like I did. Can explain." "Please do," I interrupted, still smiling pleasantly. "I'm fascinated to hear how you'll explain ordering the exact same romantic dinner package that I just recreated here." I gestured to the table. Same wine, same strawberries, same everything. She stared at me, mouth working silently. "Or maybe," I continued, "you'd like to explain the hotel charges on our credit card, the new lingerie, the late-night work meetings?" Linda's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape routes. "How did you—" "No. I followed you yesterday, watched you get into Robert's BMW after he picked up your little romantic dinner. But that was just confirmation of what I already suspected." I pulled out my own chair and sat down, eerily calm. "Please sit. Your dinner's getting cold." Mechanically, Linda lowered herself into her chair. That's when she noticed the papers beneath her plate. Her hands trembled as she picked up the top sheet, an email she'd sent Robert 2 months ago, detailing exactly what she wanted to do to him the next time they met. "You went through my private emails?" Indignation flared briefly before sputtering out under the weight of her own hypocrisy. "Yes, I invaded your privacy to discover you've been invading our marriage. Quite the moral quandary, isn't it?" I poured wine into both glasses, the rich red liquid catching the candlelight. "A year, Linda. A whole year of lies." "It's not—" she started, then stopped herself. Even now she was going to try to minimize it. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did." "Things don't just happen for 12 months, Linda. That's 365 deliberate choices to betray me, to come home, look me in the eye, and lie." She flinched at that, her eyes filling with tears. Good. I wanted those tears, needed them. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. The absurdity of the statement made me laugh, a harsh, ugly sound that surprised even me. And yet, here we are. Me, hurt beyond words. You, caught in a web of your own making. I raised my glass. "Cheers to unintended consequences." Linda didn't touch her wine. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now?" I leaned forward. "Now we talk about Robert. Married Robert. Robert with 2 college-age kids and a wife named Carolyn, who probably thinks he's working late tonight." Her eyes widened. "How do you know all that?" "I'm thorough, Linda. Always have been. It's why I've never had an accident in 32 years of driving. I pay attention to details." I sipped my wine, savoring the bitter taste. "Like the fact that your boyfriend has ordered that same romantic dinner package from Market Fresh at least twice a month, according to the very helpful clerk there." Linda closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Tom, please—" "Please what? Forget it happened? Pretend I don't know you've been sleeping with another man in hotels I paid for with my overtime hours? While I worried about your safety during your late meetings?" My carefully maintained calm began to crack. "While I trusted you completely?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry you did it or sorry you got caught?" I pushed the emails toward her. "Because based on these, you were perfectly happy continuing indefinitely. planning weekend getaways, discussing a future together. Linda's head snapped up. He promised he would leave Caroline. He said, and there it is. I sat back, a cold satisfaction spreading through me. You were planning a future with him. Tell me, was I supposed to get a phone call one day? Sorry, Tom, I've fallen for someone else? Or were you just going to keep stringing me along indefinitely? She had no answer for that. The man you've pinned your hopes on, I continued relentlessly, orders the same romantic dinner for you that he probably orders for other women. Did you know that? Did you think you were special? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. What do you mean, other women? The Market Fresh clerk recognized him immediately, said he orders that package at least twice a month. Unless you're seeing him bi-weekly like clockwork, some of those dinners weren't for you, Linda. Her face crumpled, fresh doubt mixing with her guilt and fear. You threw away 26 years for a man who was probably cheating on you too? I shook my head. There's a certain poetry to it. From his hiding spot, Mike shifted slightly, a quiet reminder of his presence. But I no longer needed a witness. This moment, this conversation, was seared into my memory with perfect clarity. I want a divorce, I said finally, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be receiving papers next week. Linda looked up, suddenly panicked. Tom, no, we can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start. Please don't throw away everything we've built. The audacity nearly took my breath away. I didn't throw it away, Linda. You did. One lie, one hotel room, one romantic dinner at a time. I stood up, suddenly unable to sit across from her any longer. You have until tomorrow evening to pack your essentials and find somewhere else to stay. I'll be sleeping at Mike's tonight. You're kicking me out of my own home? Indignation crept into her voice. Our home. The home I've paid 80% of the mortgage on while you spent our money on lingerie for your boyfriend. I gestured to the table. Enjoy your dinner? It's already paid for. By me, this time. Mudal. Mike's guest room was sparse, just a twin bed, nightstand, and lamp, but I barely noticed my surroundings. After the confrontation with Linda, my mind kept replaying her expressions, her attempts at justification, her tears. I'd spent 26 years learning to read her face, and tonight I'd watched it display every emotion, from shock to fear to the particular strain of calculation that meant she was formulating her next lie. You okay, man? Mike leaned against the doorframe, holding 2 beers. I took one gratefully. Define okay. Fair enough. He sat on the edge of the bed. For what it's worth, you handled that better than most would have. No yelling, no throwing things. What would that accomplish? I took a long pull from the bottle. Besides, the quiet approach rattled her more. She was expecting explosive anger, something she could use to paint me as unreasonable. Mike nodded slowly, always the tactician, even in this. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the events of the evening settling around us like dust after an explosion. You're really contacting his wife tomorrow? Mike finally asked. Absolutely. My resolve on this point was ironclad. Caroline Kincaid deserves to know her husband's been lying to her, same as I deserve to know about Linda. It'll blow up their marriage. Robert already did that. I'm just making sure Caroline has all the information. I finished my beer. Linda and Robert made their choices. Now they can live with the consequences. Mike didn't argue further. He understood perhaps better than most, having been through his own divorce 5 years earlier. Different circumstances, his ex-wife's gambling addiction rather than infidelity, but the sense of betrayal had been similar. After he left, I tried to sleep but found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone instead. Linda and me on vacation in the Smoky Mountains last year, at Mike's 4th of July barbecue, celebrating our 25th anniversary with a dinner cruise. Had she been seeing Robert then, planning rendezvous while smiling for these pictures? The timeline I'd pieced together suggested yes, and the knowledge retroactively poisoned every happy memory. I deleted them all, one by one, until my photo library contained only images without Linda, pictures of my truck, landscapes from my roots, gatherings with friends where she happened to be absent. My phone buzzed with incoming texts. Linda, of course. Please come home so we can talk about this. I know I made a terrible mistake. We can fix this, Tom, please. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't be better communicated through lawyers. Instead, I opened Facebook and searched for Caroline Kincaid. Her profile was mostly public: charity events, family photos, proud posts about her children's accomplishments. Robert featured prominently, always the picture of devoted husband and father. The performative happiness made my stomach turn. I drafted a message, deleted it, then drafted another. How exactly do you tell a stranger that her husband has been cheating on her with your wife? No etiquette guide covered this particular social scenario. Finally, I settled on directness. Mrs. Kincaid, you don't know me, but I need to share some difficult information with you regarding your husband, Robert. I recently discovered he's been having an affair with my wife, Linda Wright, for approximately 1 year. I have documentation if you wish to see it. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, but I believe you deserve the truth. If you'd like to discuss this further, my number is... I included my contact information but didn't send the message yet. Morning would be soon enough. Tonight was for processing, for the quiet grief that comes before rebuilding. Sleep eventually claimed me around 3 a.m., bringing vivid dreams of driving endless highways, searching for exits that didn't exist. I woke to sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee. For one blessed moment, I didn't remember. Then reality crashed back, bringing with it a renewed sense of resolve. Today wasn't about Linda anymore. Today was about tying up loose ends and taking the first steps toward whatever came next. After a quick shower, I joined Mike in his kitchen. "There's the man," he said, sliding a mug toward me. "You look like hell, but slightly better than last night." "Progress," I muttered, gratefully accepting the coffee. "So what's the plan today? Want company for the Caroline conversation?" I shook my head. "I'm handling that solo. Just a heads up, though, I might need your spare room a bit longer than expected." "Stay as long as you need," Mike said without hesitation. "What about work?" "Called my dispatcher earlier, taking 2 personal days, back on the road Thursday." The structure of work would be good for me. Hours alone with the highway, time to think and plan my next moves. "And Linda? Think she'll be gone when you get home?" I checked my phone. 7 new messages from her, all variations on "please," "sorry," and "we need to talk." If she knows what's good for her, I sipped my coffee. But first I have an appointment at the bank to separate our accounts, then a meeting with a divorce attorney Gary recommended. Mike raised his eyebrows. "Moving fast." "No point dragging it out. The marriage is over. Has been for a year, though. I just found out." I scrolled to the draft message to Caroline. Time to make it official. I pressed send, watching the message indicator change from sending to delivered. Another bridge burned, another step toward whatever my life would look like after Linda. "You sure you're okay?" Mike asked, watching me carefully. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." The First National Bank of Westridge occupied a corner lot downtown, all glass and steel, trying too hard to look modern while maintaining a sense of old money stability. I'd been banking there for 30 years, since my first trucking job. The personal touch was why I'd never switched to one of those online banks Linda had sometimes suggested. Martha Green, the branch manager, had known me for most of those 30 years. Her hair had gone from auburn to silver in that time, but her no-nonsense efficiency remained unchanged. "Tom," she greeted me, rising from behind her desk. "What brings you in today? Everything all right with the accounts?" "Not exactly, Martha." I settled into the visitor's chair. "I need to separate my finances from my wife's. Immediately." To her credit, Martha's expression registered only momentary surprise before shifting to professional concern. I see. Joint checking and savings. And the investment account. Everything. She nodded, fingers already typing. I'll need to see your ID and we'll have some paperwork to complete. Whatever it takes. Martha worked methodically, explaining each step as she went. Our primary accounts were converted to individual ones. Linda would need to come in separately to establish her own. The process was surprisingly painless, clinical even, which somehow made the reality of what I was doing more bearable. The investment account is trickier, Martha explained. Since it's a joint taxable account, we'll need to either liquidate and split the assets or transfer ownership, both requiring Mrs. Wright's signature. Let's freeze it for now, I said. My attorney will handle the rest. Martha peered at me over her reading glasses. Tom, I don't mean to pry, but is this permanent? These changes can be difficult to undo. It's permanent. The words felt strange in my mouth, solid and real. 26 years, Martha, down the drain. She reached across the desk and briefly squeezed my hand, a gesture so unexpected I almost pulled away. I'm sorry, truly. Thank you. I cleared my throat. Is there anything else we need to take care of today? Just signatures here and here. She pushed forms across the desk. And Tom, if you need any financial advice during this transition, don't hesitate to call. I signed where indicated, each stroke of the pen another step away from the life I'd known. Outside the bank, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then thought better and answered. Tom Wright. A woman's voice, tightly controlled. Mr. Wright, this is Caroline Kincaid. My heartbeat quickened. Mrs. Kincaid, thank you for calling. Your message was unexpected. Her voice carried the particular strain of someone working very hard to maintain composure. I'd like to meet in person, if possible. Of course. When and where? There's a coffee shop called Pembroke's on Main Street. Does 1 o'clock work for you? I checked my watch, 11:30. I'll be there. Mr. Wright? Her voice caught slightly. Thank you for telling me. The call ended, leaving me with a peculiar mixture of vindication and regret. Caroline Kincaid hadn't asked for any of this, hadn't deserved to have her life upended by her husband's selfishness any more than I had. I'd done the right thing in telling her, but that didn't make it any less painful to be the messenger. My next stop was Gary's recommended attorney, Lawrence Schaefer. His office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian downtown. The interior, an unexpected blend of traditional law office gravitas and modern efficiency. Schaefer himself was a surprise, younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with the build of a former athlete and the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing. Mr. Wright, he greeted me, rising from behind his desk. Gary mentioned you might be calling. Please, have a seat. I did, oddly comforted by the leather chair's firm support. I need a divorce attorney. So I gathered. He folded his hands on the desk. Why don't you start at the beginning? I laid it out for him, the discovery, the confrontation, the evidence I'd gathered. Schaefer listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. Infidelity cases are messy, he said when I'd finished, but you've been methodical. The documentation helps significantly. What are my options? Ohio is a no-fault state, but adultery can impact property division and spousal support in some circumstances. He leaned forward. Given the length of your marriage and the evidence of infidelity, we have several approaches available. The question is, what do you want out of this? I'd been asking myself the same question since yesterday. I want fairness, not revenge, not punishment, just what's fair. Schaefer nodded approvingly. Refreshing approach. Many clients in your position want scorched earth. Burning everything down would just leave me with ashes, I said. I'm 57, Too old to start over with nothing, too young to spend the rest of my life bitter. Fair division of assets, then. Equitable separation of property. No ongoing financial entanglements. Schaefer made notes as he spoke. What about the house? I'd like to keep it if possible. I paid most of the mortgage. We'll make that a priority. Anything else? I thought about it. My retirement accounts. I need those protected. Understood. He set down his pen. My retainer is $5,000. We can have paperwork filed by the end of the week if you're certain. I'm certain. I wrote the check, another step away from my old life, another step toward whatever came next. As I left Schaefer's office, my phone chimed with a text from Linda. I'm at the house packing some things. Can we please talk when you get home? I didn't reply. Instead, I headed toward Pembroke's, where another betrayed spouse waited to compare notes on the collapse of our respective marriages. Pembroke's Coffee occupied a narrow storefront wedged between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. Inside, exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs created an atmosphere of cultivated coziness. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving scattered patrons typing on laptops or engaged in hushed conversations. I spotted Caroline Kincaid immediately, though we'd never met. Something in her posture, rigid, alert, withdrawn, mirrored what I'd seen in my own reflection that morning. The body language of someone whose world had just imploded. She was elegantly put together. Camel hair coat draped over the back of her chair, pearl earrings, honey blonde hair swept into a neat chignon. Mid-50s, but looking younger, with the kind of maintained beauty that spoke of regular facials and discreet cosmetic touch-ups. Robert Kincaid's trophy wife, though I suspected there was steel beneath the polished exterior. Mrs. Kincaid? I approached the table. Tom Wright. She looked up, her hazel eyes rimmed with redness, but dry now. Mr. Wright, please, sit down. I did, noting the untouched latte before her. A server approached immediately, and I ordered black coffee. I appreciate you meeting me, Caroline said once the server had gone. Though these are unusual circumstances. That's one way to put it. She studied me with surprising directness. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I'm not sure. Someone angrier, perhaps, more volatile. She adjusted her watch strap, a nervous gesture at odds with her composed demeanor. How long have you known about the affair? 2 days, though according to the evidence I've gathered, it's been going on for about a year. Caroline flinched slightly. A year, she repeated, the words hollow. And your wife's name is Linda? Yes, Linda Wright. Graphic designer, works mostly freelance? I nodded, surprised. You know her? Number. But apparently I've paid her. Caroline's laugh held no humor. I found invoices this morning, design work for the charity foundation I chair. Robert recommended her services last spring, said she was highly talented. The server returned with my coffee, providing a momentary reprieve from the awful implications of Caroline's discovery. Robert hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He'd been funneling business to her, creating legitimate reasons for them to be in contact. I'm sorry, I said when we were alone again. That's particularly cruel. Calculated, Caroline corrected, her voice hardening. Robert has always been calculated. It's what makes him successful in finance and, apparently, in adultery. She leaned forward slightly. You mentioned documentation. What exactly do you have? I explained about the emails, the credit card statements, the parking lot observation. With each detail, Caroline's expression grew more resolved, her eyes colder. And you confronted your wife last night? Yes, she admitted everything. Tried to explain it away, of course. Of course. Caroline sipped her latte, finally breaking its pristine foam surface. I confronted Robert this morning. He denied it at first, claimed you must be confused or vindictive. Then I mentioned the design invoices. And? He switched tactics, said it was a mistake, meaningless, driven by my neglect of our marriage while I focused on the foundation. Her smile was razor thin. Classic Robert. Even his confession becomes an accusation. I understood perfectly. Linda had tried similar deflections, suggesting our marriage had grown stale, that I was always on the road, that Robert made her feel seen in ways I apparently hadn't. "What will you do now?" I asked. Caroline's expression turned grimly determined. Divorce him, obviously, but not before ensuring he regrets every second of his deception. She reached into her designer handbag and removed a business card. "My attorney. I suggest you have your representation contact her directly. It would benefit us both to coordinate certain aspects of our respective proceedings." I accepted the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering for Janelle Chen, Family Law. "You've moved quickly." "I've had practice," Caroline said flatly. "This isn't Robert's first affair, just his most elaborate. I forgave the others, midlife crisis, temporary insanity, whatever justification seemed plausible at the time." She straightened her already impeccable posture. "I won't make that mistake again." The revelation that Robert was a serial cheater shouldn't have surprised me, yet somehow it did. I wondered if Linda knew, if she genuinely believed she was special, or merely the latest in a line of conquests. "Mr. Wright, Tom, may I ask a personal question?" "After everything else? Please do." "Does it get easier?" The pain? For the first time, Caroline's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly, revealing the raw hurt beneath. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never been here before. 26 years, one marriage." 31, she replied softly. "High school sweethearts." We sat in silence for a moment, two strangers united by parallel betrayals, by the particular grief that comes from losing not just a spouse, but a shared history, a foundation of trust built over decades. "I should go," Caroline said finally. "I have a foundation board meeting at 3. Life continuing its absurd normalcy despite everything." "I understand. I'm back on my truck route Thursday." She gathered her coat and purse, then paused. "One more thing. Will you be telling Linda about our meeting?" I considered the question. "Not directly, but I won't hide it if it comes up." "Good. I'd like Robert to know we've compared notes." Her smile held no warmth. "Let him wonder exactly what we discussed." As Caroline walked away, posture perfect, head high, I felt an unexpected sense of camaraderie. We were strangers thrown together by circumstances neither of us had chosen, yet I suspected she would weather this storm with the same quiet strength I intended to demonstrate. I finished my coffee and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Linda, plus a text. "I've packed some clothes and will stay with Jennifer for now. Please call me when you're ready to talk. I'm so sorry, Tom. I never meant for any of this to happen. Never meant for it to happen." As if a year-long affair were something that just occurred spontaneously, like bad weather or a flat tire. I paid for both our drinks and headed to my truck. It was time to go home, not to reconcile or even argue, but to begin the meticulous process of untangling 26 years of shared life, to sort through what remained and decide what was worth keeping. The house would feel different now, emptier in some ways, lighter in others. But it was still mine, and unlike the marriage it had contained, the foundation remained solid. 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, lawyer meetings, and the mechanical routines of daily life. I'd returned to my route, finding unexpected comfort in the familiar rhythm of highways and delivery schedules. Linda had officially moved in with her friend Jennifer, though I suspected that was temporary, a staging area while she figured out her next move. The divorce proceedings were underway, our lawyers exchanging documents with the efficient hostility of professional adversaries. Linda had initially balked at the terms, especially regarding the house, but her position weakened considerably when presented with the evidence of her infidelity. Through it all, I maintained a rigid emotional discipline limiting our communication to practical matters only. Her attempts to discuss reconciliation or explain her actions were met with polite but firm redirection to our respective attorneys. Caroline Kincaid and I had spoken twice more, brief, purposeful conversations about timeline coordination and evidence sharing. Her divorce was proceeding even more rapidly than mine, aided by what she cryptically referred to as leverage from previous indiscretions. I didn't press for details. It was during my Friday route, somewhere between Toledo and Cleveland, that I received the text that would trigger the next phase of this unraveling marriage. Robert ended things, said he's trying to save his marriage. Can we please talk? I've made a terrible mistake. I pulled into the next rest stop, the steering wheel sticky beneath my suddenly sweating palms. Anger surged through me, not just at the message itself, but at its timing, its presumption, its pathetic predictability. Of course, Robert had ended things. Caroline had mentioned substantial financial consequences if he didn't commit to marriage counseling. And of course, Linda was now trying to backpedal, to salvage what remained of our marriage now that her fantasy future had collapsed. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Mike. "She texted you, didn't she?" he asked without preamble. Jennifer told Sarah that Linda's been a mess since Robert broke it off. Small towns, no secrets. When did this happen? Yesterday, apparently. Jennifer said Linda came home from meeting him completely hysterical, been crying ever since. I processed this information, trying to identify exactly what I was feeling. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not even vindication. Something colder, more clarifying. "You're still coming to Dan's retirement party tomorrow, right?" Mike asked, changing the subject. Dan Phillips had been my first dispatcher 30 years ago. His retirement party would gather most of the old trucking crew, men I'd worked alongside for decades, who'd watched my relationship with Linda grow from excited newlyweds to comfortable middle age. Men who now undoubtedly knew about her betrayal, given how news traveled in our circles. Wouldn't miss it, I confirmed. Just need to finish this run first. Good. Sarah's making her potato salad. A pause. Tom, what are you going to do about Linda? It was the question I'd been asking myself since receiving her text. What did I want? The marriage was irrevocably broken. No amount of counseling or apologies could restore my trust. But there remained the matter of closure, of final words that needed saying. I'm going to talk to her, I decided. One conversation. After that, everything goes through the lawyers. You sure that's wise? Probably not, but it's necessary. After finishing my deliveries, I texted Linda, "I'll be home Sunday afternoon. We can talk then." Her response came immediately. "Thank you, Tom. I'll be there at 2. I spent Saturday at Dan's retirement party, surrounded by the rough camaraderie of career truckers. These men had been my extended family for decades, had attended our wedding, had helped me move furniture, had covered routes when I needed time off for Linda's father's funeral. "Heard about Linda," Dan said gruffly, cornering me by the beer cooler. "Damn shame." "It is what it is," I replied, the phrase having become my standard response. "You doing okay? Really?" I considered the question seriously. "Getting there? Some days are harder than others." Dan nodded, his weathered face solemn. "Listen, Tom, I've known you most of your adult life, seen you handle everything from blizzards to jackknife trailers without losing your cool. But this is different. Don't let it harden you." Bit late for that advice. "No, it isn't." He clapped my shoulder. "Being hurt and being cold aren't the same thing. Remember that tomorrow." His words stayed with me through the night and into Sunday morning as I prepared for Linda's visit. I cleaned the house methodically, not to impress her, but to impose order on my external environment while my internal landscape remained chaotic. At 1:58 p.m., her red Mazda pulled into the driveway. I watched through the window as she checked her appearance in the rearview mirror, the same gesture I'd observed before her meeting with Robert. The familiarity of it stung in unexpected ways. She approached the door hesitantly, looking smaller somehow, diminished. When I opened it, the contrast between this Linda and the woman I'd married was striking. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her normally perfect makeup applied with less precision, her shoulders curled inward protectively. "Tom," she said, her voice catching, "thank you for seeing me." I gestured her inside, maintaining a careful distance. She entered slowly, taking in the subtle changes to our home. Rearranged furniture, her decorative pillows stored away, her favorite reading chair now positioned differently. "Would you like coffee?" I offered, defaulting to basic hospitality. "Please." In the kitchen, I moved with deliberate efficiency, the routine of brewing coffee providing a momentary shield against the conversation to come. Linda perched on a bar stool at the counter, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. "How have you been?" she asked tentatively. "Managing," I replied, measuring coffee grounds. "And you?" "Miserable," she admitted. "I've made the biggest mistake of my life, Tom. I see that now." I placed a mug before her, black with 2 sugars, just as she'd always taken it. "Because Robert ended things," she flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I leaned against the counter, maintaining distance. "You weren't miserable enough to end the affair on your own. Only after he chose his wife did you decide our marriage might be worth saving." "It wasn't like that," she protested weakly. "Then explain it to me, Linda. Help me understand." Linda wrapped her hands around the coffee mug as if seeking warmth. "It started as a professional relationship. He hired me to design materials for Caroline's foundation." "I know that part already," I interrupted. "Caroline told me." Linda's eyes widened. "You've spoken to Caroline Kincaid?" "Several times. Turns out people who've been betrayed often have a lot to discuss." I kept my tone neutral, informational, rather than accusatory. "Continue." She swallowed hard. "At first it was just flirtation, compliments about my work, then about me. It felt good, Tom. I know that's terrible to say, but it did. The attention, the excitement." "The secrecy," I added, "the sneaking around behind my back. Did that feel good too?" "No." Her voice cracked. "That part was awful. Every time I lied to you I hated myself a little more. But I'd convinced myself you wouldn't notice, that you were so busy with your roots, so content with our routine, that as long as I maintained the surface of our marriage, the rest wouldn't matter." The casual cruelty of her justification took my breath away. "You thought I was too oblivious to notice you building a separate life? Too emotionally obtuse to sense the distance growing between us?" "I didn't think you were happy either," she countered, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "We barely talked anymore, barely touched. Our marriage had become comfortable, but empty. So you filled it with lies instead of addressing the problems." I took a sip of my own coffee, buying time to control the anger rising in my chest. "Did you ever consider talking to me, suggesting counseling? Anything besides betraying every promise we ever made to each other?" Tears welled in Linda's eyes. "I should have. I know that now." "But you didn't. Instead, you let me believe everything was fine while planning weekend getaways with Robert, planning a future with him." I set my mug down with deliberate gentleness. "Tell me something, Linda. If I hadn't caught you, if your romantic dinner scheme had gone off without a hitch, how long would you have continued? Another month? Year? Decade?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know." "I think you do. I think you were waiting for Robert to leave Caroline, waiting for the retirement fund to mature, waiting for the perfect moment to leave with maximum benefit and minimum consequence." "That's not true." The protest lacked conviction. "Then what is true, Linda? Because from where I'm standing, the only reason you're sitting in our kitchen right now is because Robert chose his wife over you." The words emerged harder than I'd intended, sharpened by 3 weeks of suppressed pain. Linda seemed to collapse inward, her shoulders hunching as if under physical weight. "You're right," she whispered. God, you're right. And I hate that about myself. I hate what I've become. The raw honesty caught me off guard. I'd expected continued defenses, minimizations, blame shifting, not this naked admission of moral failure. When Robert ended things, it was like waking up from a trance, she continued, voice steadier now. I suddenly saw everything clearly, what I'd thrown away, who I'd hurt, what I'd become. And Tom, I am so sorry. I believe that you're sorry now, I said carefully, but I'm not sure it matters. Linda looked up, hope flickering briefly in her eyes. I needed to extinguish it cleanly, kindly, but firmly. Our marriage is over, Linda. Not just because you slept with another man, but because you systematically lied to me for a year. You looked me in the eye day after day and deceived me. That's not something we can come back from. People recover from affairs, she argued. It happens all the time. We could try counseling? This isn't about an affair, it's about trust. I don't trust you anymore, and I never will again. I spoke the truth that had crystallized during these weeks apart. Even if I wanted to try, which I don't, I'd always be wondering where you were, who you were with, whether you were lying again. That's no way to live. What if I earned your trust back over time? Desperation edged her voice. Why? I asked simply. Why would you want to? 3 weeks ago you were planning a life with Robert. Now suddenly our marriage is worth fighting for? Linda, you don't want me. You want security, stability, the comfort of the familiar now that your fantasy has imploded. Her silence confirmed my assessment. I deserve better than being someone's backup plan, I continued gently. And honestly, so do you. Neither of us would be happy trying to rebuild something that's fundamentally broken. Linda wiped tears from her cheeks. I've lost everything. No, you haven't. You've lost our marriage, and that's significant. But you still have your career, your friends, your health. You're 52, not 82. There's still time to rebuild, to figure out who you want to be for the second half of your life. Without you, she said, the words hollow. Yes, without me. I softened my tone, not out of residual affection, but basic compassion. We had 26 good years, Linda. Let's not destroy that memory with a bitter, prolonged divorce or a doomed reconciliation attempt. Let's end this as cleanly as possible and move forward separately. Linda stared into her coffee, now surely cold. When she finally looked up, something had shifted in her expression, resignation perhaps, or the first glimmer of acceptance. I never thought it would end like this, she murmured. Neither did I. But here we are. I gestured around our kitchen, the site of thousands of shared meals, conversations, ordinary moments now tinged with the melancholy of impending absence. I'll keep the house as we discussed. You'll get your portion of the equity and retirement funds per the agreement. We'll sell the vacation property and split the proceeds. It sounds so clinical when you put it like that. 26 years reduced to assets and liabilities. The alternative is messier, more expensive, and more painful for both of us. I held her gaze steadily. Is that what you want? No, she admitted. I just wish... Don't. I cut her off gently. Wishing doesn't change what happened. It doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't unmake choices. Silence settled between us, not the comfortable quiet of long-term companions, but the weighted pause of two people realizing a chapter was irrevocably closing. Outside, a lawn-mower droned, a neighbor's child laughed, ordinary Sunday sounds continuing, despite the small apocalypse taking place in our kitchen. There is something I need to know, I said finally. Did you love him? Linda's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the question. She considered it for a long moment before answering. I thought I did, she said softly. But looking back now, I think I was in love with the excitement, the newness, the fantasy of it all. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger. Robert represented everything missing from my life, or what I convinced myself was missing. Adventure, passion, risk. Things you could have sought within our marriage, within yourself. Yes, the admission seemed to cost her. That's the part I can't forgive myself for. I destroyed something real chasing something that wasn't. I nodded, finding unexpected closure in her answer. He's done this before, you know. Caroline told me you weren't his first affair. Linda paled. What? Apparently there were others. She forgave him previously, but not this time. I watched comprehension dawn on her face, the realization that she'd been neither unique nor special in Robert's life. Just another conquest, another ego boost for a man with a pattern of infidelity. Did he tell you he loved you? I asked, unable to stop myself. That he'd leave Caroline once the timing was right? Linda's silence was answer enough. He never intended to leave her, I continued, the pieces aligning with cruel clarity. The foundation, their social standing, their shared assets. He was never going to walk away from that. You were just convenient, available. Stop, Linda's voice cracked. Please. But something in me needed her to understand the full scope of her miscalculation, not to cause pain, but to ensure she recognized the reality of what she'd traded our marriage for. You sacrificed 26 years for a man who discarded you the moment his wife threatened his finances, a man who's probably already eyeing his next affair partner. The words were harsh, but necessary. Was it worth it, Linda? Was he worth it? She began to cry in earnest then, not the manipulative tears of our confrontation weeks ago, but deep, body-racking sobs of genuine grief and regret. I watched her break down, feeling strangely detached, as if observing a scene in someone else's life. I've been such a fool, she managed between sobs. I've ruined everything for nothing. I didn't contradict her. There was nothing to be gained from false comfort, from platitudes that minimized the magnitude of her choices. Instead, I waited while she cried, offering a box of tissues from the counter. Eventually, her tears subsided, leaving her looking utterly drained. What happens now? She asked, echoing her question from our first confrontation. Now we finish what we started. The divorce will be final in about 3 months. You'll continue staying with Jennifer until you find a place of your own. We'll communicate through our lawyers about asset division and remaining paperwork. And us? Will we ever speak again? Be friends? I considered the question seriously. I don't know, not any time soon. Maybe someday, when this isn't so fresh, we might manage civility. But friendship? I honestly don't know if that's possible. Linda nodded, accepting this assessment. I understand. She gathered her purse and stood, seemingly aged years in the space of our conversation. I should go. I walked her to the door, maintaining the careful distance I'd established from the moment she arrived. At the threshold she turned, looking at me directly for the first time since her tears. I am sorry, Tom, not just because it didn't work out with Robert, or because I got caught. I'm sorry because I hurt the best man I've ever known, because I broke something precious out of selfishness. Her voice was steady now, stripped of excuses or justifications. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know that. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed the Linda I'd fallen in love with decades ago, direct, emotionally honest, capable of genuine self-reflection. It made what came next both harder and more necessary. I believe you, I said, and I hope you find peace with your choices. I really do. What about you? Will you be okay? I thought about Mike's spare room, about my route stretching across the Midwest, about the lawyer meetings and paperwork still ahead, about the empty spaces in the house that had once held our shared life. Not right away, I admitted, but eventually, yes, I'll be okay. She lingered a moment longer, perhaps waiting for something else, a touch, a softer word, some sign that a door remained slightly ajar. When none came, she nodded once and walked to her car. I watched her drive away, feeling the peculiar lightness that comes with finality. There was grief there, certainly, the death of a future I'd once taken for granted, the loss of my life's central relationship. But beneath that grief lay something solid and sustaining, the knowledge that I'd handled this crucible with dignity, with clarity, without surrendering to bitterness or revenge. Back in the kitchen, I collected our mugs and washed them mechanically. Linda's lipstick stained the rim of hers, the last physical trace she would leave in this house until we met again with lawyers to sign final papers. I thought about calling Mike, but decided against it. This moment belonged to me alone, the quiet aftermath of a storm that had destroyed much, but left the foundation intact. Tomorrow, I would return to my route, to the highways and delivery schedules that had structured my life long before Linda and would continue long after. The familiar rhythm of wheels on pavement, the solitude of the cab, the satisfaction of reaching destinations, these would be my companions in the months ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. How did it go? I considered how to respond, finally settling on simple truth. It's over. Really over. Moving forward now. Her reply came moments later. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. We'll both be fine. I smiled slightly at her directness. Yes, we would both be fine. Not immediately, not painlessly, but eventually. Because beneath the specific betrayal we'd experienced lay a universal truth. Life continued. Routes still needed driving, sunrises still appeared on schedule, and resilience, like grief, was part of being human. I put away the clean mugs, both of them, because despite everything, I wasn't quite ready to discard the matching set we'd bought together decades ago. Some separations happened gradually in stages, some healing, too. Outside, the neighbor's lawnmower fell silent. Sunday afternoon continued its lazy progression toward evening, and inside the house that was now truly mine alone, I began the quiet work of reconstruction. 6 months later, I eased my rig into the loading zone at Midwestern Distribution Center, right on schedule, despite the light snow that had followed me from Columbus. The November chill hadn't quite turned bitter yet, but winter was making its approach known, a fitting backdrop for marking half a year since my divorce had been finalized. "Right!" The loading dock supervisor, Hector, waved me over. "You're 10 minutes early. Again." Traffic was light, I offered, though we both knew punctuality was simply baked into my professional DNA. 32 years on the road had instilled habits that divorce hadn't altered. "Got time for coffee?" Just brewed a fresh pot. I checked my watch. "Sure, 20 minutes before they start loading anyway." Hector's office was cramped but warm, photographs of his grandchildren covering most available wall space. He poured coffee into a styrofoam cup and handed it to me. "How's the new route working out?" he asked, settling behind his desk. "Good. Home 3 nights a week now instead of 2. Company's been surprisingly accommodating." "Not surprising at all. Drivers with your safety record and seniority don't grow on trees." Hector leaned back in his chair. "How's the rest of life treating you?" The question was casual, but I caught the underlying concern. News of my divorce had traveled through professional circles. Not the details, thankfully, but the basic fact. The trucking community had its own grapevine. "Getting better," I answered honestly. "Some days I barely think about it." "And other days?" "Other days are harder, but fewer of those lately." Hector nodded, satisfied. "Time does that. My sister's divorce nearly broke her, but now, 3 years later, happier than I've ever seen her." I sipped my coffee, neither confirming nor rejecting the implied optimism. The truth was more nuanced than simple recovery narratives suggested. Some days brought genuine contentment in my solitude. Others carried an echo of loneliness that no amount of rational perspective could silence. Healing wasn't linear. I'd discovered that much. "Got plans for Thanksgiving?" Hector asked, changing subjects. "Mike and Sarah invited me over. Their kids are coming home from college." "Good, good. Shouldn't be alone for the holidays." I didn't tell him I'd considered taking a holiday route, the premium pay and empty highways holding their own appeal. In the end, I'd decided Hector was right. Some occasions called for human connection, even for someone growing increasingly comfortable with solitude. After loading was complete, I hit the road again, settling into the meditative state that long-haul driving often induced. The cab of my truck had become a mobile sanctuary of sorts, podcast-filled hours of forward motion serving as both profession and therapy. Near Toledo, my phone rang through the Bluetooth system. Caroline Kincaid's name appeared on the display. "Hello, Caroline," I answered, our occasional check-ins having evolved into something approaching friendship over the months. "Tom, how's the road?" "Cold but clear. How's Phoenix?" She'd relocated after her divorce, using part of her settlement to open an art gallery, a lifelong dream previously deferred to support Robert's career and raise their children. "Sunshine and 75 degrees? You should visit sometime." "Might take you up on that when winter really hits." The easy banter faded into more meaningful territory as Caroline asked, "How are you really doing? It's been 6 months today." Of course, she'd remembered. Her divorce had been finalized just 1 week after mine. "Better than expected," I said truthfully. "The house finally feels like mine instead of ours. Got the master bedroom repainted last weekend." "Good, that's important. Reclaiming spaces. How about you?" "Busy with the gallery, dating occasionally, nothing serious." She paused. "I ran into Robert last month when I was back for Jessica's graduation." My hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "How was that?" "Strangely anticlimactic. He's lost weight, looks older, tried to reminisce about good times, as if the divorce had been some mutual, amicable decision." Her laugh held genuine amusement rather than bitterness. The most surprising thing was realizing I felt nothing. No anger, no lingering attraction, just nothing. I understood completely. I'd experienced something similar during my last interaction with Linda, a perfunctory meeting to sign final paperwork. The woman who had once been the center of my emotional universe had become almost a stranger, her power to wound me diminished to nearly nothing. "That's when you know you've moved on," I observed, "when they become just people again, not emotional lightning rods." "Exactly. Have you heard from her lately?" "Just once. She's moved to Cincinnati, took a full-time position with a marketing firm. Seems to be doing okay." "Do you ever wonder if she and Robert—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "That chapter's closed. Whatever happens in either of their lives isn't my concern anymore." Caroline murmured agreement. After a few more minutes of conversation, we said our goodbyes, promising to check in again soon. As I continued northward, I reflected on how differently things might have unfolded if I hadn't received that errant notification 6 months ago. I might still be living in blissful ignorance, or perhaps the deception would have continued indefinitely, poisoning our relationship in ways I couldn't even identify. The discovery, painful as it was, had forced a reckoning, had cleared away falsehood, and created space for truth. Not a comfortable truth, certainly, but one that allowed for authentic rebuilding rather than continued self-deception. At the next rest stop, I pulled over for fuel and coffee. While waiting for my tank to fill, I noticed an older couple at the neighboring pump. They moved with the synchronized choreography of people who had spent decades together, he checking tire pressure while she cleaned windows, small tasks divided with wordless efficiency. They caught me watching and smiled, the woman offering a friendly wave. 53 years next month, the man said, following my gaze to his wife, still finding new things to appreciate. "Congratulations," I replied sincerely, feeling a complex emotion that wasn't quite envy, wasn't quite regret, but something subtler, appreciation for a path different from mine, recognition of its beauty without diminishing my own journey. Back on the highway, as darkness fell and snowflakes began to dance in my headlights, I found myself reflecting on the strange geometry of life, how sometimes you had to lose something valuable to gain something essential. I had lost a marriage but recovered myself in the process, had rediscovered resilience, self-sufficiency, and the capacity to face painful truths without being destroyed by them. The truck's headlights carved a path forward through the gathering darkness. 6 months ago, that metaphor would have seemed heavy-handed, too on the nose to take seriously. Now it simply felt like an accurate description of where I found myself, moving steadily forward 1 mile at a time, headlights illuminating just enough road to navigate safely toward whatever waited beyond the visible horizon. Not a Hollywood ending, perhaps, no dramatic reconciliation, no neat resolution tied with a perfect bow, just a man driving his route, doing his job, finding his way forward. And somehow, that felt exactly right. This quiet victory of continuing, of rebuilding, of choosing to remain open to whatever came next. I reached for my coffee and turned up the radio slightly. The highway stretched before me, familiar and new all at once.